You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins. Glad to have you with us on this Monday afternoon. The website, TonyPerkins.com. If you're on social media, on Twitter or Parler, it's at T. Perkins. All right, here's another clip I want to play of President Trump Friday night at Mount Rushmore.
Angry mobs are trying to tear down statues of our founders, deface our most sacred memorials, and unleash a wave of violent crime in our cities. Many of these people have no idea why they're doing this, but some know exactly what they are doing. They think the American people are weak and soft and submissive. But no, the American people are strong and proud, and they will not allow our country and all of its values, history, and culture to be taken from them.
Well, this violence, mob violence that is enveloping cities across the nation, last week, Utah Senator Mike Lee went to the Senate floor to speak about this and put forth a simple resolution. Now, wasn't going to solve the problems. They're still trying to work on that. It was just going to put the Senate on record saying, we condemn this lawlessness. But it didn't happen. Why? Joining us now to talk more about this is Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who authored last week's resolution. Senator, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's good to be with you.
Well, Senator, it looked pretty straightforward to me, just a simple resolution calling on the Senate to renounce, to condemn the violence that was taking place across the nation. It just said it started this way. The United States of America was founded in 1776 on universal principles of freedom, justice, and human equality. Throughout our nation's history, Americans have struggled to realize those ideas, but nonetheless made greater progress toward them than any nation on earth. And it's being put at risk with the violence, and you called on your colleagues to pass it, but they would not. Why?
Yeah, they would not because they decided that they couldn't agree with that. And it really is stunning. It was surprising to me at the time. An innocent an innocent man was shot by Black Lives Matter supporters in Provo, Utah, just last Monday. This poor man was not trying to make a statement. He was just trying to get home. And Black Lives Matter supporters surrounded his car in downtown Provo, and one of them shot him. That's completely unacceptable. And so my resolution, all it did was call on the Senate to condemn violence and physical assault and destruction of property. The resolution was designed to be unifying. It avoided controversial subjects. All it asked of us was basic dignity and civil respect, and apparently that's to ask for today's Democratic Party. We've got to start defunding those that hate America and do it on America's dime.
I mean, it's becoming quite evident, Senator, that this partisan divide in the Senate, that there are those that see this as political opportunity and political theater. For instance, just the week before last, your colleague, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, had a measure put forward to address the issue of police brutality and just to begin to address the issue. The same thing happened. Democratic members of the Senate, with the exception of two, blocked it and kept it from even having debate on the measure.
Yeah, that's right. That is indicative of how far we've descended in all of this. It really is kind of crazy. And in fact, to put a point on this, to demonstrate the fact that they didn't really find the language itself objectionable, but wanted to use it to score political points, they offered to let it pass as long as we would insert language saying all elected officials, especially the President of the United States, need to understand that, it's important not to inflame other people. And I said, look, I'll take the rest of the language, but I'm not going to let you keep in the part about the President of the United States. I'm not going to let you turn this into an anti-Trump rant, because the whole point of it was to be unifying rather than to be partisan. They wanted to make it partisan. I wouldn't let them do it. But as I pointed out to them, this really is going to bring up a lot of additional topics. We've got federal funds going to colleges and universities that punish free speech and discriminate against religious students and conservatives. We've got city councils who defund their police departments and refuse to protect public safety. We've got school districts who embrace the ahistorical nonsense of the 1619 Project. These people are hating America on America's dime, and it's time for us to cut off their allowance.
That makes perfect sense, I think, to most Americans. I want to go back to your resolution for just a moment, because basically it concludes with, therefore, be it resolved that it is the sense of the Senate that the rising tide of vandalism, mob violence, and the mob mentality that feeds it, including its cruel and intolerant cancel culture, should be condemned by all Americans. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. It is anti-American. It undermines the very republic, which extends to them the freedoms that they are taking advantage of, and quite frankly, the lawlessness that is raging throughout cities. I have to. My conclusion is, Senator, that what we see happening on the streets in many ways is a product of America's anti-American education system.
Yeah, I think that's right. They have co-opted the entire system so as to get people to hate America. You no longer see civics and principles like federalism and separation of powers being taught in schools the way they used to. And instead, what you see is a lot of really sort of self-loathing anti-American propaganda, which is really disturbing. And this is why it's so important for us as families to talk about these things around the dinner table, to tell the stories of America's founding, about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, if you're absolutely right. This is a time where parents, grandparents need to step forward and fill the vacuum that has been created by an educational system that is hostile to these founding principles, but in doing so undermines their own authority and their longevity. We got to take a break, Senator. Will you stick around? I want to ask you a couple more questions about what do we do? You know, this cancel culture. How should Americans respond to this? Can you stick around?
Sure.
All right. Folks, Senator Mike Lee is going to stay around for our next segment. We're going to be talking about what you can do, what we need to do in this hour when the cancel culture is raging across America. All right, I've got another clip I want to play from President Trump speaking at Mount Rushmore on Friday evening. Play clip number 3, please.
One of their political weapons is cancel culture, driving people from their jobs, shaming dissenters, and demanding total submission from anyone who disagrees. This is the very definition of totalitarianism, and it is completely alien to our culture and to our values, and it has absolutely no place in the United States of America.
Senator Lee, are you concerned? Do you share the president's concern about this cancel culture?
Absolutely, I do. Look, President Trump's speech the other day in front of Mount Rushmore was probably the best of his presidency. The very founding of our nation is under attack from a wealthy coastal elite. And the New York Times is now abandoned any pretense of objectivity that it once had, and is now actively trying to teach society and our children that we live in a racist country that's unworthy of defense. So we've got these angry mobs tearing down statues of Washington and Jefferson and Columbus. We can't let them do this. The very best thing we can all do, that all of us, all of your listeners can do, is to talk about American history, real American history at the dinner table. Talk to your kids about the founding documents and the ideas in them and why they were so revolutionary and so good. America is great, and these things are no longer being taught in popular culture. And so we as families have to do it ourselves. We can do it, but we do have to work at it.
Well, and there's a sense of urgency because there is, as you said, there's no pretense that there's somehow objectivity in our media anymore. They've become the opposition party to everything conservative, to not just this president, but to the conservative principles and ideals upon which this nation has been built upon. And many Americans are fearful from this cancel culture. People being driven from their jobs. Of course, they're being attacked on social media. This is a form of intimidation seeking to marginalize and silence the vast majority of Americans so a small percentage can come in and take over.
No, that's exactly right. And that is the definition of propaganda, or it's one of the best definitions that there is. It's a type of pervasive messaging that seeks to completely marginalizing any opposing viewpoints. If you can marginalize an opposing viewpoint as not worthy of expression, and as if it came from someone who is utterly undeserving of even being heard, you have successfully implemented a propaganda machine in a way that would have made, a lot of the early propagandists in the early part of the 20th century really envious. And I hate to see that happening here in the United States.
Well, and Senator Lee, you're a student of history, a student of the Constitution, a brilliant constitutionalist in our United States Senate. But when you see what is happening here, where there is a silencing of really the majority of Americans, they're fearful, they're intimidated by this. But what has made our republic work for 244 years is the ability to have differing opinions, but to be able to verbalize those opinions, walk into the public square, have a vigorous debate, and then arrive at consensus, having put out your concerns, having the other party put out their concerns. We arrive at a workable agreement, a way forward. That's not happening now because of the silencing, and that is dangerous to the future of this country.
It is. It's dangerous, and it's not good for us as humans. It's not good for our souls. That's why this thing that people talk about, civility, ultimately centers on Jesus Christ's teachings of love and respect. We can disagree with someone without being disagreeable. We can disagree with them even passionately while still loving them and treating them with decency and respect. That's why love is the ultimate antidote to incivility.
And that, quite frankly, is why this experiment has worked for 244 years. And if we lose this foundation that you just made reference to, which actually the president made reference to at Mount Rushmore, our Judeo-Christian heritage, which has, again, been systematically attacked by the prevailing elitist culture, we lose the very foundation upon which we stand, which we can work out our differences and preserve the future.
Yeah, that's right. This is the greatest civilization the world has ever known. And we're great not because of who we are, but because of what we do, because we've chosen to be good and kind to each other.
Well said. Senator Mike Lee, I want to thank you for joining us today, but I also want to thank you for stepping forward in the face of this cancel culture and saying what needs to be said. There are still a handful of you on Capitol Hill that are willing to do that, and you need to know that there are many, many, many people across America grateful for your courage and your leadership.
Thanks so much, Tony.
All right, Senator Mike Lee of Utah.